Good evening, everyone. Whoa, I test, test, test. Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin. Hi, everybody. My name is Anthony Driver Jr., and I have the current pleasure of serving as the interim president for the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. Welcome to the fourth of our four forums with new CPD Superintendent Larry Snelling, as required by the CCPSA ordinance. We had great forums in Chinatown, the West Side, and 2 weeks ago at Chicago Police Department headquarters. There were lots of great questions from the audience. We are looking forward to an equally productive dialogue this evening. The purpose of today's meeting is for community members to share comments and questions with Superintendent Snelling to provide recommendations to the commission to inform our work with the superintendent. I would like to welcome Walter Matthews and Jen McElroy, who will be serving as ASL interpreters for the event. We wanted to make this an accessible event for the disability community. It is also being live streamed online and with closed captioning. Chicago Police Department is working on new policy and training to serve the disability community. If you would like to make a public comment tonight, please fill out a comment card and give it to one of our staff members who are walking around the room, or hand it in at the check-in table. We will stop collecting questions at 7 p.m. There are also some of my fellow commissioners who've joined us tonight. I believe I just saw Commissioner Loizen, who was here. I think she was here. Oh, there she is. Hi, Commissioner Loizen. We're also joined by Alderman Exposado, and I believe I saw Alderman Gardner as well. And as is our custom with the CCPSA, if we do have elected officials in the room, we do like, especially if we're in the ward that they're hosting it, to give them an opportunity if they would like to welcome, or if not, that's totally fine also. And
Hi, I'm Alderman Jim Gardner. We just wanted to thank everybody for coming out. And I think we all are in agreement. Public safety is a very important issue, if not the most important issue in the city. And we're fortunate Snelling here to discuss some matters, and hopefully we can get some questions answered for you. And we thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm Nick Sposato, Alderman in 38th Ward. I saw a lot of my constituents here, so happy you made it. I always say there's two problems when you have a meeting, things you have to worry about. One of them is good weather, one of them is bad weather. Today, the problem was good weather, obviously. So really good day. So people are probably staying home, but hopefully we get some questions answered. And that's about it. So thanks again for coming.
thank you, Alderman. Also, are there any district council members in the room? If so, please stand to be recognized, or give a wave, however you'd like to be recognized. I'm also joined by our Vice President, Commissioner Ramel Terry. On April 7, 2023, the CCPSA initiated a nationwide search for the next superintendent of the Chicago Police Department. Throughout the process, the commission took great care to ensure the voices of the community were at the forefront. The commission conducted 7 community listening sessions across the entire city, including a virtual session and a session that was in Spanish. The commission met with 3 unions that represent the vast majority of sworn members of the Chicago Police Department. We developed and circulated several surveys and surveyed community members, organizations, members of law enforcement, and members of the newly elected district councils, and we obtained over 600 responses. The commission also met with 34 subject matter experts and held targeted listening sessions with over 65 organizations spanning across sectors, including activist and advocacy groups, business groups, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, labor groups, legal aid providers, and social service agencies. On July 27th, the commission nominated 3 people to serve as superintendent, including Chief Larry Snelling. On August 13th, Mayor Brandon Johnson selected Chief Snelling to be Chicago's next police superintendent. Chief Snelling was unanimously confirmed by the City Council on September 27th of 2023. I would like to invite Superintendent Snelling to share some brief remarks before we open the meeting to questions and comments.
First of all, good evening. Oh, come on, good evening. All right, all right. It's great weather out there. It's good to be here. First of all, let me thank President Driver and Vice President Terry for being here, and CCPSA for holding this meeting. I'd like to thank the Copernicus Center for hosting this tonight. And this is the final listening session for my confirmation to superintendent. So tonight we'll be discussing CPD's efforts to better serve people with disabilities. As with all public safety efforts, we have to tailor what we're doing to individual needs of each community. In the past few years, as part of our reform efforts, we've been working to strengthen our policies and procedures around interactions with people with disabilities. This is also rooted in our effort to be more inclusive and advocate for marginalized communities within the city we serve. We're incorporating disability awareness within our training and are working to update our current policies that provide guidelines on interactions with individuals with disabilities. We're doing this with input from those living with disabilities so that their perspectives are represented in these policies. I also want to remind everyone that we have an ADA coordinator who focuses on broadening access to CPD programs and services for those with disabilities. The coordinator can be reached at adacoordinator@chicagopolice.org, and we'll provide that information from anyone before we leave here today if you're interested in it. I'm grateful for this opportunity to hear from you tonight. It's important that we not only hear, but we continuously listen and learn from those who are directly affected and have the lived experience. With that, I'll turn it back to the president. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Snelling. The commission will now provide an opportunity for the public to ask questions and to make comments. Anyone with a question or comment will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When I call your name, please either come up to the microphone or make someone on our staff aware that you want to speak, and we will try to bring a microphone to you to speak. I'd ask that we all be respectful of one another. And also, please, there is a lot of cards up here. And in order for us to get through this in a timely fashion, we really need you to respect the 2 minutes. This is sort of a town hall format. Many of our public comment sections of our formal meetings, it's our common practice that commissioners and or the people on stage do not respond to public comment. That is not what type of meeting this is. So the superintendent or Commissioner Terry or myself may ask a follow-up question or ask you to elaborate more if we're trying to better understand what it is that you want to get across to us. So with that being said, should we do 3? So I'm going to call in groups of 3 to try to keep the pace moving a little bit. So please listen for your name. Again, when you come up to the microphone, say and spell your name for the record, please. The first speaker is Chuck Hernandez, followed by Arlene Andino, followed by, I believe this says Darcy Torres. Chuck Hernandez.
Okay, good evening. My name is, excuse me, I'm too close. Okay, I'm Chuck Hernandez. I was actually a Chicago police officer until I retired in January of this year. I did 28 years. I don't think our paths ever crossed, but I heard good things about you. And my question is, what is the makeup of our district here in 16? I heard we're down to about 180 officers in a huge geographical boundaries. You know, the 16th district is very, very large. My concern is we don't have enough policemen to patrol this huge area. And it's unsafe to have one-man cars out. I've seen some of before I left the job, I seen some of the roll calls with one-man cars, and this is unsafe. I don't know where we're going to get the bodies from, but all I know is we have a detail on the mayor and all this stuff that was way larger than when me and you first came on the job. It was maybe 20 guys or something. Now this unit is over 100 individuals. We need to put these people back in patrol. We need to fill these patrol spots. Also, I was a detective, so I know that patrol is the backbone of the department. We need patrolmen. They're the eyes, they're the ears. They see, they know who's walking around in our districts. And we need those guys back in the fields. We need to fill those spots.
First of all, congratulations on your retirement, 28 years. What I'll tell you is you're right. We are down. We're down close to 2,000 officers. There's been a serious problem with recruitment, especially since 2020. We're starting to see that change a little bit. We're actually getting more people into the academy, not as many as we would like, but we are getting more people into the academy. What we're doing right now is making the best with the number of officers that we have. So what we're doing right now, there are a lot of positions that officers are filling that are more of administrative positions, which is why we've opened up a lot of positions to hire non-sworn members to come in and do those jobs so that we can get more officers on the street. That's one. Two, we have boosted up our recruitment efforts right now. We're doing more with that. Still, I feel like we can do even more, and we're going to continue to do that. But the key here is to rebuild the image of the department, to make it a job that people actually want to do again. There's been a lot of and there's been a lot of negativity around it, you know, ever since 2020. And this is not just Chicago. This is around the entire country. And I've actually been in other parts of the world and seen that they're having recruitment problems also. So the profession of policing has taken a hit, but I think in rebuilding the image, rebuilding our officers, getting them better trained, reprofessionalizing the job in a way that's going to make it be something that someone to and say, hey, listen, I want to retire from this job because I love it that much. So we are working on that. Yes.
Hi, Arlene Andino, Andino. I'm CPD family. We are excited that he's coming close to retirement, which is something that we weren't looking forward to because he loves what he does. So now, you know, I mean, even the kids are going, you know, let's go, hurry up, get out, you know, and it didn't used to be that way. So that part of it doesn't feel great. You know, and we've lived here 31 years. One of the best neighborhoods in the city. There were always officers around and we just don't see that anymore. And the last superintendent that came here, I came to a meeting because literally there was a shooting on, you know, Sunnyside and Laramie, and there were no officers to respond to that shooting. There was another one on Milwaukee, another drive-by. There's a lot of gangs around here now that just weren't here. Everybody was being chased around because we had officers as deterrents to prevent that. And you see so many things happening now, and it's just, you know, it's unfortunate that I personally passed by coming down Cicero, just trying to get home 3 blocks away. And there's a lady on the ground crying because she was a victim to that robbery that took like 4 districts that they went through, that they hit, you know, like whatever time in the morning. There was a car that was a carjacked car was dumped behind my garage, and my neighbor finds it at 3 o'clock in the morning, just trying to go to work. And it was behind our garage. So there's so much of this happening that wasn't here. We do need officers here. We understand that we're short. We get it. We know you're doing your best. I love that you're speaking up for officers. I love that you're pushing back on the narrative. And I hope you just continue to do that.
Well, thank you for that. I will continue to do that. I mean, you know, as you know, we just lost an officer. But here's here's what I want everybody to know that's going on right now. One of the biggest issues that people are worried about right now, robberies, shootings. That's huge across the entire city. It's affecting every neighborhood right now. So what we're going to have is a more focused, and what we actually have right now is a more focused mission on robberies. We have seen a reduction in robberies. We've seen a major reduction in robberies, but if we have 1,000 robberies and we reduce that 1,000 robberies to one, tell the one person who got robbed that there's a reduction. I mean, that doesn't bring comfort to the person who's been robbed. But what I can tell you is that we have a coordinated effort where we're involving not only our police officers, our detective division, our vehicular hijacking teams, the helicopters, everything that we can get involved with the city. We're also working with the county. We're working with federal partners. We're working with the state and surrounding suburbs, because a lot of these robberies are not only occurring in the city, but they're also occurring in the suburbs, and then they make their way back and forth. So with that coordinated effort, we've been able to take down a lot of these robbery crews. The key here now is that once we take those crews down, that we have to find a way to hold them accountable on a larger level. So when we have repeat offenders, we have to be able to keep repeat offenders in jail, because if we don't have that type of strategy, and then the question is, especially when it comes to juveniles, when we release them, if they're going to be released, there's got to be something that's going to deter them from going back into that life. So there has to be something and some type of reform that is established to stop them. So there has to be an alternative measure, and it can't just be a volunteer program. It has to be something that's mandatory to make sure that they don't fall back into that same life of crime. So we are working on that, and we'll be giving every district assistance with that.
Hernandez, Arlene, and Dino, and Darcy. Darcy here, Gary or Darcy? Our next three speakers are Mark McKelvey, Pastor Doyle, and Jenny Schaefer. Mark here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Pastor Doyle, Positive Vision Ministries, and I trust you all stand the intent. Officer Luis Huesca is exactly 10 days younger than Mr. Driver. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we were, oh, sorry. Is that better? Okay. If I can get some more time, because I thought of, thank you. So 3 weeks ago when we were at 35th in Michigan, Officer Huesca was alive and his mother could say his name. So 3 weeks later, a day after, his mother had the worst day of her life. We have to be clear about the violence in Chicago, and it's time that we start being honest. Because that is the obituary of my barber's son. As a Marine Corps veteran, my barber doesn't touch my hair from today, the 30th, until May 30th, the day that his son was killed in front of him in Inglewood, near Hamilton Park. So when we who are African American can look at the problem of violence for what it is our problem. It has nothing to do with other races. The same voices that want everything African American in this city also have to claim the mess that we are making.
4.
It is not just Officer Huesca's family, but other families who wake up every day wishing that their loved one was here. And we who are African-American must ask ourselves, who pulled the trigger? God bless.
Before you step up, there was a mark. I don't want to skip people if you are here. Sorry.
There's been a lot of community-based violence prevention efforts the last recent years, as there have been across the country. I think of Chicago Cred, Arnie Duncan, and the activity with Erickson, the Metropolitan Peace Initiatives through Metropolitan Family Services, a lot. How do you feel about those? What do you think they might be able to get from the city for funding? You know, do you have any thoughts about the way they coordinate or don't coordinate well with the police?
Well, what I can tell you, I can't tell you much about the funding or where their funding comes from, but what I can tell you about it is that I've worked with a lot of these groups. I worked with a lot of them when I was the commander of Inglewood. I worked when I was the Area 2 deputy chief. And there was some really effective work being done by a lot of our people in the outreach world. One of the things that I can tell you now is that when we have team gatherings and we have intel that we're going to have a team gathering, whether it's at the beach, rather it's going to be downtown at a movie theater or along Roosevelt Road, we have had, we've reached out to them, they show up, they help us out with the young people, and they've actually done a really good job of curbing some of that. So they have partnered with us in those ways. I think there are things that we can do better. I think we can do a deeper dive. I met with a bunch of the leaders of the group probably about 2 weeks ago. It was fruitful. We talked about things and efforts that we can do to try to get to the younger people, because that's more of the issue right now, our youth. And if we can get more of a handle on the youth and then start reaching back when these people are younger and younger and younger, because we don't want them to go down the wrong path. So if those efforts can help us bring the young people along and keep some of the violence down, then it's helpful. And I've seen it work in certain areas. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every group is equal in their efforts and how they get work done. But you do have some people who are really good and really dedicated at getting that done. So I'm just a strong believer in this. I want to reach out to anybody I can who is willing to help bring down the crime, right? I'm not going to turn my back on anybody who is stepping up and saying, we want to have a safer community. We want to live in a safer environment, and we want to protect our people. So anybody who's willing to do that, I'm willing to work with, as long as they're serious about it.
I would really encourage that. I did fundraising for some of these groups, and the philanthropic community that's helped launch a lot of this.
Yes.
It's really having donor fatigue after a lot of years and millions of dollars spent. So as much as you can set an example with the whole police corps to cooperatively take advantage of some of these community-based groups, that would be great.
Absolutely. I can tell you the Civic Alliance is doing a great job of raising money for the CBI community right now. They're looking in excess of $60-70 million. So it's out there.
Hi, Jenny Schaefer. I'm the 19th Police District Council, Jenny. Schaefer is Schaffer. At the very beginning of this, you mentioned hiring more civilians. I know that's a goal that you've spoken about before. It's also something that was part of the budget. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more on how those efforts are going, how many civilians have been added currently to the force, and just, yeah, if you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
So right now, positions still open right now. We're hiring. Our hiring practices in the past have been a little slower, and what we're trying to do is work that up a little quicker so that we don't lose good people who are waiting and are offered other jobs. So we are really pushing this effort to get people in. So if anybody in here knows anyone who needs a job, who is willing to, fill out an application, apply for something within the Chicago Police Department, we are definitely hiring at non-sworn positions. So the more applications we can get in, and if you go to chicagopolice.org, you can see some of the jobs that are posted there.
So it's 400 was the number that was the goal. Have we met any of those positions yet? Or is the problem that people aren't applying, or is it just a slow process, or where's the breakdown there?
Well, there's a little bit of everything there, right? The process needs to be quicker, which is one of the things that we're working on right now currently. And it's actually more than the amount of positions that were added. But we knew coming into this, we had to do a better job of getting people hired quicker. The other thing is applying for those jobs as they're posted. We do have people applying. We would like to see those efforts increase. So we're campaigning to get more civilians into the department. So if there's anything anybody out there can do, if you have friends, if you have family who are interested in it, please tell them to go to chicagopolice.org and look up some of these positions, fill out an application, and we'll be looking to hire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next three speakers are Awera Winters, District Council Member, Andrew and Sophia Camposano.
Good evening, Arewa Karen Winters, AREWA KARENWINTERS, 15th District Councilwoman. Good evening. Anthony, I am a bully, but I bully with my heart. So only the superintendent can answer questions because I have two. One for Romeo. So when the superintendent came to the meeting at the NAACP, we were talking with him with woman. I'm a leading organizer with the Consent Decree Coalition, especially now because in the last community meeting, you mentioned adding the pretextual stops to the consent decree. And I'm just trying to understand, like, how does that happen? Because we haven't, and this is the same thing we said about the last superintendent. We had zero engagement with him. So it just made it really hard for us to express our concerns, the resistance that we get from the department, areas, all of the gray areas where we are really diligently trying to work with the department to make things better. So I'm trying to understand, how are you going to, and now there people are saying, well, that's because that's where we want things to go to die, because we haven't had much progress around the consent decree. And I know you'd say you're at 6% full compliance and so much percent in other compliances, but 6% is still 6%. So do you plan on getting us on a schedule anytime soon so we can begin dialogue and help to push the needle forward, and after 5-6 years, move us past 6% compliance?
So here's you wanna go here?
Please be respectful.
Please.
Please be respectful. Thank you.
All right, just real quick. One of the things is I'm trying to remember that meeting, because I know we met with the NAACP. I remember going over to the west side. I'm not sure if we were supposed to set that meeting up, but here's what I'll tell you. I'm willing to meet with anybody to sit and have a conversation, because I think these conversations absolutely need to happen. And we need to have a conversation so that we're clear about what it is needs to be done. Here's one of the things that I'll tell you about the consent decree, because here's what people don't understand about it. The 6% is what everyone harps on. We have to think about the development of the policies. Those policies are not simply developed by the Chicago Police Department. You have the OAG in there. So when they're in there, we also have the monitoring team. So when we come up with these policies, those policies also have to be open for public comment, right? For community input. So once that is put in, now you have the monitors who look it over, you have the attorneys who look it over, and then the OAG's office, they look it over. This could go back and forth for several months before that policy is actually approved. Once that policy is approved, that's your first level of compliance. That takes months. Now we have to get all of our officers trained up on that policy. And you're talking about 11,000 officers who have to go through that training. That can take a year to get all of those officers through that particular training. And then there are multiple trainings where that has to happen. So that's how now we start to get to our full levels of compliance. Now, you'll start to see this increase. And I think what you'll see on the front end is mostly policy development and training. And then we'll start to see those numbers increase. However, I do think it's important that we sit with the coalition and talk. One of the things that I know that I need to be a part of now is when we sit in front of the judge and we talk about these things. So I will be there representing the Chicago Police Department. And what I want is full transparency, because I want there to be a clear understanding of the consent decree. What's important to me about the consent decree is that it's not just a piece of paper. The consent decree alone is not going to fix things. That I don't know how I can say this enough times. It's the same thing as when we give someone an order of protection. If no one is reinforcing that and backing up that order of protection, then it's just a piece of paper. So when we talk about the consent decree, that's consent decree has to have things in it that's balanced so that police officers can still do their jobs and still protect the communities and not just strip every ounce of power away from a police force so that they're rendered ineffective. Obviously, we want our officers well-trained. We want respectful officers who are out there engaging with communities in a respectful manner. We want our officers using force according to policy when they have to, and not use it if it's not absolutely necessary. But we also want our officers to be able to protect themselves, because if they can't protect themselves, they can't protect anybody else. But there is a way to balance that. And the way to balance that is to come to some type of consensus with community members. If we're not working in lockstep with the community, everybody's failing. If we draw a line in the sand, and if someone else draws a line in the sand and says, hey, police shouldn't exist, then it doesn't matter what the consent decree says. We have to have a clear understanding of what it is that police officers need to do, how they need, what levels of control they need in order to protect the communities and protect themselves. But we also need that balance to have everybody understand where an officer can use force, how that force is used, and have it explained in a way that is understandable for everyone. Unless you're looking down the barrel of a gun, unless you're a lone officer and you're standing in a location where there are 20 people who want to hurt you, you don't really understand at that point what that officer is feeling and how they're going to respond. So I am willing to meet with you
Okay.
as soon as possible.
Because you gave me a card, we
But here's
emailed,
what
and
we're
never
going
got
to
a
do.
response.
I'm going to make you a promise right now. We will sit down as soon as we can, and my chief of staff is right there. We will set up a meeting and we will have a conversation. But I just want to let you know that conversation is going to be open and honest, and we're going to give you as much information as we can. And I think that dialogue will be very helpful for the both of us.
All right, thank you. We ready.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Mikołajczyk. That's Mikołajczyk. I work with seniors and with help people with disabilities. So I appreciate your focus on serving this population. I attended also the funeral yesterday, the portion. So our condolences to the family and to the Chicago Police Department. I completed during my service CERT, Community Emergency Response Team training. So it was very helpful in my area of work, and also Civilian Police Academy. So it helped me to learn and to respect the work that you are doing. My questions. A few years ago, there were dedicated police officers who worked with seniors. So my question is, do you still support seniors police officers who work in every district? And so I'd like to get your perspective on this. The other question is related to the Democratic National Convention. This is a national event that would draw national attention. So how are you going to prepare the city, the citizens for this extraordinary event? Thank you.
All right. First question, do we support our seniors? Absolutely. Every district has a community policing team, and they should be supporting our seniors. I do believe that it's a program that we can build upon. I'd like to introduce Mike Milstein, if you'd like to stand up for a second there. So this is the deputy director in our community policing, with our community policing strategies. He does a great job. And we're building on some programs right now. We're reworking the way that we do community policing, because I think we need a further reach in our communities, and we need to do a better job of reaching out. So that's one. Two, our Democratic National Convention. One of the things that I've said before, and I'll say it again, we have started training from the day we found out that we got the Democratic National Convention. It was kind of like what happened with NATO. And what we did was we looked at every single problem that we may have had in previous large gatherings like this. So when the World Trade Organization came here in 2002, we looked at everything that went wrong. We got sued for over $6 million. So we looked at the worst practices, we looked at best practices, right? We fixed those things where we failed, and we adopted some of those things, or most of those things, where we were successful. So we're going to continue to do that. Every single day, our officers are in training, and they're getting multiple hours of training on First and Fourth Amendment. It's embedded in every aspect of their training. So we're out there to make sure that people who want to protest can do it and exercise their First Amendment, as long as they're doing it peacefully, as long as there's no violence, as long as there's no looting or vandalism. Now, crime, when we see crime occurring, we're going to step in. But when people want to protest, we're allowing them to do so. So if you notice with our universities here, people are protesting peacefully. We're not engaging them in a way that's going to inflame what it is they're trying to do. If people are just trying to have their voices heard, hey, this is America. It's their choice, and it's our responsibility to protect them while they do it. But crime is something that we're not going to tolerate, because the minute we start tolerating that, everything else breaks down, and then it's no longer peaceful protesting. It turns into a riot. So we have to protect our citizens. We have to protect their lives. During the riots of 2020, we had 28 people murdered in a day, right? That is unacceptable. So that's something that we're not going to tolerate, but we are going to be out there to make sure that we protect the rights of peaceful protesters.
Snelling, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I may need a few more seconds if that's possible. My name is Sophia Camposano. I am the wife of a United States veteran. He's physically disabled. We are victims of a crime that's so heinous, it's unbelievable that it could happen in the United States. I asked CPD to check on my husband. I was told he was fine. He was not fine. He was not even at Peterson Park Nursing Home. He was at the hospital. He was not allowed to make or receive calls. He was not allowed visitors. He is now at Peterson Park Nursing Home against his will. He pleads to go home with me. I was an RN and I hold a master's degree. He's not allowed to use the computer. His calls from family and friends are not transferred to him. He's not allowed visitors. He is isolated. He has been to the emergency room 6 times since the middle of February and has spent weeks in the hospital. He has bed sores. He has had many drug resistance, urinary tract infections, pneumonia, COVID, blood infections due to the abuse. He is denied his hearing aids. He's not permitted to make medical appointments and arrange transportation. He's denied medical care. He's woken in the middle of the night. He is taken out of bed at most 1 time per day, left in a wheelchair for hours in pain. His guardians are Midwest Care Management and Old Second National Bank. We are decimated and tortured by them. Our possessions, assets have been taken and our house sold. Isolation and solitary in jail and military is a form of punishment. Neither me nor my husband are criminals. We have not committed any crimes. He is an amiable, decent, well-respected individual. My husband would be better off in jail. This United States veteran and his wife have no constitutional rights. He is a hostage. This is human trafficking. He is locked in a place that he does not want to be. He is isolated. He is tortured for the benefit of his captors. I plead for my husband's life. Midwest Care Management has been committing guardianship crimes for years. There are many guardianship victims. We are victims of elder cleansing. Our situation is like the Netflix movie, I Care a Lot. Superintendent Snelling, I ask for your help to investigate this.
Mike, before we leave, can you get her information? And I promise you, we will have someone look into that immediately.
I have tried to speak to the commanders.
Look right into it.
I would very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next 3 speakers are Bella Boz, Pete Kazonite. I apologize. I'm sure I messed your last name up. And Jane O'Malley.
Hey, I don't have time for an introduction. Dexter Reed was murdered by hunters. The involved officers were assigned to the 11th District TAC unit because they are hunters, because they are predators. Between the 5 of them, none of them have been on the force more than 5 years, yet they've already, since 2019, amassed at least 41 COPA and BIA investigations. The department knew that these particular officers had a propensity for violent and unconstitutional policing, but instead of them being held accountable for it, they were held in high esteem for it. Instead of them being condemned for it, they've been commended for it. Through their assignment to the TAC team, these officers' ambition-driven patterns and practice of misconduct and aggression have been rewarded and incentivized, thus highlighting what my community has been saying for generations, that unconstitutional use of force is not only tolerated, but is celebrated within the Chicago Police Department. Their most predatory officers are assigned to specialized units where they don't wear CPD uniform, they don't drive marked CPD vehicles, they don't answer CPD service calls. Instead, they're encouraged to operate outside standard CPD procedural guidelines in order to make arrests by any means necessary. They've been given free rein to conduct their targeted harassment of a perceived dangerous class of Black and brown folk in the 11th district, which only accounts for 2.5% of the city population, but is where 15% of traffic stops that involve use of force happened last year. Superintendent Snelling, You cannot condemn the officer's practice of targeting low-level infractions for invasive, intensive, and inhumane enforcement because you know that's precisely the mission that these tech teams have been given. You cannot condemn the dangerous and unauthorized vehicle maneuver used to box in Dexter's truck. You cannot condemn the officer's over-reliance on the use of lethal force to obtain compliance and failure to attempt any de-escalation tactics. You cannot condemn it because what I see as predatory and brutal, what I see as misconduct and excessive in those moments leading up to and during the execution of Dexter Reed. Superintendent, you and perhaps many others in this room see it as a legitimate expression of the King's duties as peace officers, and therein lies the problem. I tried to get it close to 2 minutes. Baby. Now talk to me.
Well, you made a statement, so,
I did.
Yeah.
You don't got nothing to say?
well, I've heard that before.
You heard it.
And what I told you is this, again, this is under investigation. And there are many aspects of what you're saying right now that are not clear. And once this investigation unfolds, you'll find out who has the responsibility when it comes to complaints, how long those complaints sit in a particular place before it even gets to the Chicago Police Department. And many of those complaints that you heard came from and is the responsibility of the very source in which they came from. So just understand this. There's an investigation that's going on right now. Within this process, there were open investigations that weren't closed, and those investigations are done outside of the Chicago Police Department. So when all of the facts are out, I'm sure you'll have more information and it'll be clearer to you. But I do appreciate your comments.
You disagree with my assessment that the officers are rewarded for their aggression. You disagree.
What's the reward?
So
Being assigned to the tech unit.
I don't want to create an environment where this is a back and forth. If that's your question, and are you gonna answer a question or do you want to move past it?
Listen, officers are not rewarded for bad behavior, especially while I'm here.
Sound good?
Hello, my name is Pete Czosnyka, CZOSNYKA, 45th Ward. This is a comment that I found. It's not my own comment, but I found it on my alderman's Facebook page. Many intelligent people comment there. I've talked to this commenter, but I'm not a psychoanalyst. If you were a fly on the wall of the psychotherapy sessions I have had with dozens of CPD officers over 20 years, you'd hear stuff that would turn your mind inside out. Every time, they are routinely horrified that they can't speak earnestly about peers' behaviors and what really prevents crime. Why? Because even appearing not to be in mental lockstep is perceived to be betrayal. Consequently, their anxiety disorders, depression, somatic symptomology, drinking, domestic abuse, and suicide rates are off the charts, easily worse than most vets. So everything stays the same. The CPD budget gets bloated further, and Chicagoans keep wondering why this la-la land approach never works. We have all met officers who are comply or die types. You especially see these guys when they're at the bar. We all know officers who will willingly take part in 5-man jump out tactics with guns drawn and kill people. Everything stays the same. How will you change the culture of the police department for the better?
First of all, let me start with a couple of things. You talked about officer wellness, and in the past, this has been a major issue. It's been a major issue because of the things that police officers see on a regular basis. And without any levels of treatment for that, those officers suffer through it just like any other human being would suffer through the things that they see that human beings shouldn't see. Since then, we have opened up 2 locations where officers can now go and get help and see clinicians. No longer within the police department are we going to make mental health and seeking out help for mental health a dirty word, right? That we cannot continue to do that. Our officers have to understand that seeking help for mental health is important, right? This is what keeps you from alcoholism, drug addiction, depression, and all of those other things. So that's one. Culture change within the department happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. That comes through training. That comes through new policies. And when those policies are in effect, those officers have to be trained. And then there has to be a level of accountability. So training from the top down is the most important thing here right now to get to some level of change. However, still has to be understood. Like I said before, we have to have a balance. And our balance is our officers being out there protecting those people who are innocent from those people who seek to do them harm. What I've seen in my career is death beyond belief. Children, the elderly, and when we look at things right now, we can say it appears to be worse. I have to thank our hospitals, especially places where we have these trauma centers, because they have saved a lot of lives. Our officers are training in a way now to understand levels of compassion that we need to have for our community members, all of our community members. When our officers go out to the street, they have to be empathetic, and they have to have an empathetic eye. The only way that we do that is to develop them to do so. That is a connection between our officers and our community. As long as this relationship is adversarial, it's not going to get fixed. Now, there's trust issues on both sides, and we've got to break those barriers. And in order to do that, we have to be able to sit down and have these open and honest conversations where we're willing to listen to each other and have respectful discourse. Until that happens, we're going to continue to butt heads. So what I can tell you right now, as long as I'm here, I'm going to be moving to make sure that, number one, that our officers are respectful with every encounter out there. We've been talking about this. I've been here for a little over 7 months. I'm going to continue to talk about it as I go along. And as we get through this, and as we get through more training, we will see more effective officers in that way. However, I also want everybody to understand this. Our officers still have to be able to protect themselves, because an officer who cannot protect himself cannot protect anyone else. So we can't simply be punching bags. However, I don't want them to make anybody else punching bags. So when an officer recognizes when he absolutely or she absolutely has to use force, I want them to use that according to policies. And I want it to be effective. I want our officers to go out there, protect our people, respect our people, and work together as a unit, as a city, because if we're not working together, then we're working in silos, and this is never going to work.
No one protected Dexter Reed.
Hi, I'm Jane O'Malley. I have no question. I just came to give you a compliment that I'm impressed by your transparency, your commitment, and to the officers and to the city of Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next 3 speakers, District Council Member Colleen Murphy, Eva Skoronsky, and Larry Rifkin.
Oh, okay. Hello. So my name's Colleen Murphy, and I wasn't going to speak today, but when I heard that this was focused on disabilities, it piqued my interest. The flyer that promoted this meeting didn't say anything about that. So disabilities and seniors, this was supposed to focus on, but the flyer didn't say that. So I have a son who's in high school who has autism, and what interests me about this is I'll tell you about him a little bit, just so you understand a little better. Autistic individuals have sensory issues, meaning this 5 senses, seeing, hearing, tactile, etc. They don't perceive things the way other people do. So my son has some loud noises he can't tolerate, and he might just start screaming. And what concerns me is I can see a police officer thinking that that might be a mental health episode or non-compliance. So I know that police do get training on special needs, but to what degree would they recognize autism if they see it? Because a negative encounter or a traumatic encounter can really destroy them for life. So my son has had therapies for, about 17, 18 years, a lot of work, time, money, a lot of effort from me and my husband. And one negative encounter can really destroy them. I mean, it can pretty much cancel all that out. So what training do police officers get? Because this would actually prevent police manpower being used in a bad way or in a wrong way where, maybe they shouldn't be punished, but maybe they should recognize that they have a problem and it's autism. So I think I made myself clear, right?
No, 100%. And
Sure.
Here's what I'll tell you. Recognizing people in crisis is very important right now, especially for police officers. When a police officer can recognize that a person is in crisis and not engaging willfully in a criminal act, or that person with a disability just doesn't necessarily have an understanding of what's happening,
Yes.
the officer has to be able to recognize that. So right now, with CIT training, our can't be a one-time training. It has to be continuous. It has to be embedded in every aspect of the training. It has to be embedded when we talk to them in roll call. It has to be a part of the leadership. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now to make the training more robust and understanding that when we're dealing with someone who has a disability or someone who is autistic, who may not understand the orders that an officer is giving them, to back up, to back out, use time as a tactic, call for additional resources if they have to. So we also, the city has a CARES program. And this is a program where when we have a non-criminal call for service for someone who's in crisis, that's not a call necessarily that the police will respond to. So there are members of the fire department, clinicians, who could show up to that location and handle those jobs without the police having to get involved in a situation like that. So what we don't want to do is criminalize someone who's in crisis. So it's an excellent question, but we're going to do more work with that.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, Superintendent Snelling and guests, thank you very much for coming on to the Northwest Side and taking the time for questions. My name is Eva, EVA. Last name is Skowronski. And I would like to address crimes committed by youth. It's more and more, and it concerns me very much. And I'm wondering if some of these little help items might make a difference. Are we missing something that would or could make a difference why so many youth are committing crimes? What kind of home life is present? Does a parent know and care where the youth is at 2, 3, 4 in the morning? Is more mentoring needed? Do we ask these youth, why did you do it? After the fact, if they commit the crime, why did you do it? And how do you feel about what you just did? Maybe we can learn something from all those answers. And I'd like us to see or do what I'm suggesting. What do we do after the fact? Do we check on how that youth feel and why did he do it? In addition, I did want to just bring up something instead of just putting them to jail. Why not work programs? Wouldn't it be a good idea to teach these youngsters it's better to do work than to go to jail? Can we think about that?
Excellent. And here's what I'll tell you about our youth. And, and I've heard this a lot about, the accountability of the parents. And listen, that was always the thing. I'm 55 years old. That was always the thing when I was growing up. There were levels of accountability with the parents. But one of the things that we have to look at with some of the kids, right? We like to blame the kids. A lot of times we like to say that these kids are rotten to the core. But here's the real truth in a lot of these situations. And it's not all of them. It's not all of them, because a lot of these kids that we see go downtown, those kids have good parents. Their parents just didn't know where they were at that moment, and they've been led around by social media. However, there are kids out there who are suffering. And when you ask where a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, where their parents are when they're out 1, 2 in the morning, we really have to look at the parents. So sometimes you have children who have had children, and they don't necessarily have the parenting skills. So when we reach out to that young person who we feel is being neglected, we actually have to reach out to the entire family. We've got to reach out to the parents. We've got to reach out to the mother, because if we're not doing that, then we're failing that child. So when we provide services for a child, that's temporary, because that child still has to go back home to the home life that they're dealing with right now. So unless we have programs in place to deal with the entire cause of that issue, then we're dealing with the symptoms and not the illness. So we have to look at everything. So one of the things that is important to me right now is that we catch youth when they're really young. The programs for very young children are basically non-existent right now. Now, this is where the community comes in, right? This is where we get people from the community who are willing to step in and do some work with the very young, do some work with the children, and then we can do what we need to do to provide resources for the family. Those resources are out there. And this is one of the conversations that I've had with the mayor about the accountability of other departments within the city who can provide those resources. And, I got a pretty good confirmation that we'll make sure that those resources are available for these families. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all issue. There are issues. As a matter of fact, right now, the mayor has a jobs program going on right now, just to make sure that kids can sign up and have access to jobs right now. But we need to do a deeper dive. So we need to get into these neighborhoods, start talking to these kids, come up with programs for these kids, tutoring, mental health. And because that is a big issue right now, as a lot of these kids in these communities are suffering from PTSD from what they see every single day. The crime that they see, the violence that they see. They shouldn't be exposed to this, but they are. So we have to find a way to reach out to get these kids a level of help so that they don't get into that lifestyle or continue down that path. So yes, there are a lot of things that we need to look into, actually working right now with the University of Chicago to come up with some programs for these kids.
So before our next speaker, we are running really long time, and there are still 15 cards here. If you are a member of the public, I ask that you please respect the 2 minutes, but if you are able to shorten it, please do. And I would also ask you, Superintendent, if you can please make your remarks a little bit more concise so we can get through as many as possible.
We'll do. We'll do. We'll do.
Yes, good evening. Larry Rivkin, R-I-V, like in Victor, K-I-N. I'm a lifelong Chicago resident, city and suburbs. As I talked with you earlier, south side, north side, and now northwest. I think I operate with a lot of, or at least some common sense, but a lot of perspective. One of the things that concerns me is that you hear the word, I mean, this is great transparency. We appreciate this. Love to see more of it. But the word accountability comes up very, very often. Can't tell you how many times I've heard it over my 70 years. And I think that's where we fall short. There really is no accountability. There are no people being fired. There are no people being their feet held to the fire. And I just asked the question the other day because I didn't know, but there doesn't seem to be a mechanism in our government system to recall the mayor. I found that appalling. Is that true? That there's no mechanism in the voter system to recall the mayor?
That's a political question. You guys got an answer for that?
Illinois law allows for governors to be recalled, but not mayors.
So that it has to be done through Illinois courts and Illinois laws. But that gets me to the fact of having been a voter for a long, long time. It doesn't seem like things have changed much, if at all, and they have gotten worse from my years on the south side and the north side and the northwest. I commend you for coming up through the ranks. I think that's a honorable choice. But we talked about just more patrolmen on the street. You have a deficit of 2,000 men and women. But that's true of every major city, as far as I know. How do you speed up that process? You're not going to get 2,000, but how can you get several hundred back?
Well, the key here is this. When we hire officers, we don't want to just hire officers. We want to hire the right officers. So we have to make sure that we're not making a mistake of hiring the wrong people because we need officers. That's just going to set us back. So right now, we're pushing an effort to get more people to apply. And we're working on it. So we are seeing an uptick in the number of people who are going into our academy. As a matter of fact, we just put 100 in there recently.
Wish you much success.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 3 speakers are Chris Gant, Marawi Jarima, and Linda Poleski.
How am I doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm Chris Gant.
Can you get a little closer?
Yes, sir. I'm pleased to be out here tonight to talk with you all. And I want to start out with Joseph Stokes and DeJuan Thomas. I coached and mentor very good human beings that didn't deserve to die at 37 years old. For someone to lead a VA, they get shot down like dogs. They done everything right, teach a school, mentoring, and the police is not doing anything about their arrest. And the word is out on the street who did it. So that saddens me. Superintendent, I appreciate you in this job because I think you actually wanted it. And from a man that took an oath like you, and like I did, for the citizens of Chicago and for this country, I think it's our due diligence to honor that oath. My daughter has 3 children that almost have been murdered by a sick-minded narcissist protected by Chicago police, did not do their due diligence. And as a result, her 4-year-old son, he almost drowned him before his 5th birthday. Her 7-year-old son and all that ended up in the hospital, almost died when the doctor said he ought to be at home recovering. When this criminal judge and all that said, told my daughter, I don't like your son and I don't like you. That's ground for recusal. She didn't recuse herself. She had my ex-wife, my daughter, and a 4 and 7-year-old under arrest in her courtroom without telling her what she was under arrest. She had her locked inside of this courtroom. It was a lawyer put a gun on both of them down there. So you need to get the film. It's $1 million per child. They got 3, and we ain't letting them go. A 7-year-old and a 4-year-old called for you. He told that judge and all that, he took us, I'm gonna call the police, because he pointed out who cracked open his head and gave him 10 stitches and who been molesting him and his brother. They testified and pointed him out. And now this clown got his feet kicked up. He's a citizen for forging my daughter's signature, and he collecting our benefits. My father went to Europe to die for this country. I served in the military to preserve the integrity of America.
Mr. Grant, you can ask your question or close out.
These cops didn't do their job. Superintendent, I'm telling you, I've been calling you, and they are not giving you the message. Odom is not passing on the message because Odom do not speak for you, so I hold no will against you. Because I know when you look at the evidence, I believe in you. I believe you would do what you're supposed to do.
Mr. Garrett,
There's a lot of these.
we got a lot more speakers. If you could
I'm gonna finish
close
this up.
your question.
I do believe that you can get us what we need by assigning your police, getting the evidence, and Chicago will be a better off city.
So, Mr. Gant, here's what I'd like for you to do. This young man over here, this officer, he's going to get some information from you, and we're going to follow up with you to get that information. Okay? I mean, because we can do this here, or we can make sure that we follow up on your case. We just had a similar case happen. I don't want to see something like that happen again. Okay?
No one needs to die.
Absolutely. I agree.
No one.
100%.
And I'm gonna tell you something. Those that I took an oath, and every day I live by it. And I done say lies. That's what I do.
What's up, y'all? My name is Marawi Garima. I'm with the Chicago Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. So I'll just go ahead and just start by something that you said that drew my attention was the fact that you said you've seen a lot of death, a lot of destruction in your time as an officer. And I want to say that Black folks in Chicago and the community have seen a lot of things as well. They've seen a lot of murder of their community by police. They've seen a lot of violence and torture enacted upon their communities by police. They've seen wrongful convictions for decades, still dozens, if not hundreds, still locked up, from Burge to his descendants with no accountability. Black folks have seen all of those things. Black folks have seen things that you could never imagine, despite your time in the streets as an officer. But one thing that they haven't seen is accountability of these police officers. Now, let me tell you something else. That's something that you yourself have never seen because it's never existed in Chicago. Police accountability is the thing that stands between you and the things that you say you want to achieve, which is bringing closer collaboration between the police and the community. That's the thing that stands between. It's not that people don't want to join with you, they don't trust you. They don't trust you because police never face accountability. So that's the first step. And we want to talk about accountability. What does that really mean? That means we have taken that equation out of your hands and created this commission. This commission has the power to do those things if you work with them. Now we talk about, transparency. You've opposed COPA's recommendation to take the police officers' powers who killed Dexter Reed. That's an anti-transparency measure on your part. They were being transparent. Now we say stand with the commission in their fight to end pretextual stops, stand with the commission in their fight to end TAC teams, stand with the commission to bring transparency to police board and COPA activities, and stand with the commission to bring accountability to all killer cops throughout Chicago. And then we'll have some type of public safety in this city. And I hope next time we have a meeting like this and on the South Side. Thank you.
As we all know, we're here because there's a lot of crime in our neighborhood. And I just want to say, I've heard a lot about where you're training the officers. I guess my question is how much training should you have to give an officer before you start holding parents responsible for their children? That's my question. I raised 2 kids and they're very good kids, and I was always with them doing things. So you can continue to train them. How much time are they spending as opposed to being on the streets? You guys take the heat for a lot, and I respect you very well, but it starts at home, and parents need to start taking care of their children. I did, and I have 2 great kids. That's my question. How much training are they spending?
Well, what I can tell you right now is the legislation is somewhat of an issue. The legislation is an issue when it comes to parents.
I know you guys have to move on, but I just really want to know. No, it's okay. It's just,
But
I think you should less training and let them get on the street and do their job and start holding parents responsible.
Yeah, and you know what? And you're 100% right. We do need to, those parents who don't know where their children are. One of the things that I'll tell you is there are a lot of parents out there that when they show up, if their children are arrested, they actually drop their kids off thinking they were going to do one thing and found out they were doing something else. So they need to watch their social media pages and just find out where their kids are going. If you're going to drop your kids off somewhere, make sure that they're going where they told you they're going, because if they're not, things break down. So the accountability measure should be there, but there are a lot of moving parts to that. So, but we're going to continue to do the best that we can.
Great, thank you.
Our next 3 speakers are Mark Rice, Patty Casey, and Troy Gaston.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First thing I want to say is, at first I came to this committee to play nice until I heard a group of white folks disrespect a Black woman that looked like my fucking mother. That shit can stop.
Troy, please be respectful. I understand that you're frustrated.
I got a threshold question for you, Superintendent. Why has policing as a profession taken a hit? Stop my time.
The time has to continue.
If he answering my question, well, my time has.
No, I understand. That's the way we've been doing it this whole time. There's still 10 more people that have to go. We just trying to get through this.
What's your question, Troy?
Help explain to us why policing as a profession has taken a hit.
Or it took a hit in the year 2020. It's taken a major hit since 2020 after the George Floyd riots.
Why though? What transpired in 2020 that caused the police department, who had a sense of esteem about themselves, taking a hit where nowhere in the country people want to become police officers? What has happened?
Well, there's a rise in anti-policing, and there are a lot of people who don't want to be a part of the department or any department at this point.
So
I believe this is your time, Troy. I'm finished.
I will say this. We must be looking at excessive force. We must be looking at the ways Black and brown people are being treated by the police departments throughout the United States. It can't just be the sentiments of the community. It got to be some accountability to the conduct of how the officers are performing their duties. You need to address that sometimes.
Mark Rice, Patty Casey.
Hi, I'm Patty Casey, and I just want to show you this picture. This is Officer Luis Huesca, who was gunned down in cold blood, all right, this past week. I am tired tonight of the people that are bashing the police when the police are out there doing their jobs. Not every policeman is bad, all right? So until you walk in their shoes, all right, please work with them. This is an example. Right now, this room should be full. This community should be here talking to the superintendent, talking to the policemen, and helping them come up with solutions. One reason crime is so high is because the community does not want to get involved. All right, people don't want to help their neighbors. You have a beat meeting. At our beat meetings in this community, we're lucky if we get 10 people. And crime has been on the rise. But it's not the police's fault solely. It's all of our fault. So we need to work together. And Superintendent, thank you for being here today in spite of losing your officer. And losing an officer is a hit to the entire city, not to just to the police department. And I'm sure that was a traumatic event for you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it.
Mark Rice here. There, Mark Rice.
Don't let the door hit you. Stay out.
Next three speakers are Joe Icebaker, Jasmine Smith, and Dodd McLogan.
Good evening, Commissioners, Superintendent, Joeioisbaker. So I'm one of the organizers with the Coalition to March on the DNC, Democratic National Convention. This is mainly a march against war. It's mainly a march against the genocide taking place in Gaza. And 70% of the weapons that have committed that genocide are provided by our government and this president. So we're marching on the DNC. My question, or the reason I'm here, is to talk again about, Superintendent, your statement that you're going to use the model of the policing during the protests against NATO in 2012 for policing these protests. So CPD that spring, I've already talked to you twice about this, so this is my third time. Their practices included infiltration of the First Amendment protected activity. Officers engaged in practices both undemocratic and illegal. First of all, several officers, about 4 that I was able to identify and 3 that became public later, pretended to be activists and engaged in entrapment, including buying marijuana and beer for several unemployed young men, and then getting them high, and then talking smack with them, convincing them to build Molotov cocktails. The police officers bought the gas. The young men had no idea how to make Molotov cocktails. The police officers taught them how to make Molotov cocktails, then raided the apartment, and those 3 young men spent years in prison. But the other thing that happened, so that's undemocratic, but the other thing that happened that was illegal is when our lawyers attempted to find those young men, they had disappeared into Homan Square. Now, several years later, the Guardian in Manchester, England, did an expose of CPD's use of black sites, and this is an illegal activity. So I have two questions. One, do you intend to send undercover officers into our coalition and our movement starting soon or anytime this summer? And second, are you going to continue the use of black sites?
First of all, Joe, look, I know that there are groups that go out there to protest. And like I said before, if you're out there peacefully protesting, there's no need to infiltrate a
You had
group that's
undercovers
peacefully
in our coalition in 2012. We identified them.
Again, Joe, I didn't have anything. I wasn't sitting in this seat in 2012.
Yeah, but you were training.
I was a sergeant who was engaged in civil unrest. That simple. Right now, if you are out there to protest peacefully, your group will march peacefully and will be protected by the Chicago Police Department. That's what we do. It doesn't matter what you believe, and if the police officers believe anything different from you, we have a job to do. And our job is to make sure that this city is safe and that we're protecting people's constitutional rights under these circumstances. And you have a First Amendment right to be out there. We're going to make sure that you can protest. It's that simple. This other undercover thing, that's a lot to unwrap, Joe. But right now, rest assured that these officers are getting this training on a daily basis to make sure that you can have your voice.
And black sites?
Black sites, again. There, right now, I can tell you, we don't have a black site in the Chicago Police Department. And I can tell you that openly.
Thank you.
Jasmine Smith.
Yeah, I think Jasmine's online. Is she first? All right. Superintendent Snelling, I was present at the last public hearing and heard your response to the outrage of the community over the murder of Dexter Reed. You continue to employ the usual defensive tactics that superintendents have always responded with when CPD officers commit crimes against the people. And let's be clear, we do know how these processes work. You can, as a superintendent, strip the policing powers from these officers while they're being investigated. You don't have to scold COPA for making a good faith effort at transparency and accountability. You can support the fight to end pretextual stops that officers are spending their time doing instead of responding to 911 calls. Once COPA concludes their investigation, you have a say in the firing of these officers. The fact is, publicly handling of it, about not taking the officers off the streets. You commented at the last hearing that these officers involved have bad habits that need to be trained out when you yourself were in charge of training before taking this position. You are commenting on the case, and your comments have given no indication to the community that you stand on the side of justice. Chicago deserves better. That's my statement. I do have a question. The question is that, from my understanding, in order to be put on a TAC team, you are meant to have 3 years of experience on the force. Officer Thomas Spanos, who was involved in this situation, who served on the TAC team that stopped Dexter Reed and was involved in his murder, served only 2 years on the force, despite that 3-year requirement before being put on that TAC team. So if what my comrade said isn't true about officers' bad behavior being rewarded by putting them on TAC teams, then how are officers selected to be on the TAC team?
Officers are selected by what we call a notice of job opportunity process. And that's overseen by the IG's office. This is something that was put together years ago. So the amount of time that an officer has to have on the job to become a TAC officer, that can be changed at some point by the chief of patrol. So again, this is something else that's still under investigation. But what I will tell you is this, and here's what I will say, because I keep hearing all of these things about this investigation. In this investigation, an officer was shot, and I think people are forgetting about that. And we are not talking about an officer who was shot. An officer nearly lost his life in this situation. That's why a full investigation has to be done on this. We keep saying that the officer was injured. An officer could be injured by slipping and falling. He was shot. This officer was shot.
You're
And,
just changing the subject.
this
You're
is,
just changing the
and here,
subject.
no, I'm not changing the subject.
You are changing the
and I
subject because we're
want- I
talking about
want
a
it
young
to
man
be
that is
clear.
dead. We're talking about a 26-year-old young man
I
that is
want to
currently
be
dead.
clear. This is part of the investigation. Part of the investigation that an officer was shot and officers returned fire.
Why is this the only part of the investigation that you'll talk about?
Because there is absolutely no reason for me to talk about something that's being investigated by COPA at this point.
But you're talking about it right now, just only one side of it. Thomas Spanos' father works for the Chicago Police Department, and that's how we got on that tag team.
Our last four speakers are Lisa Stringer, Steve Neidenbach, Frank Chapman, and Nikki Pines.
Good evening, Commander. I'm so sorry for the loss of Officer Huesca.
Thank you.
For the whole department, my heart is broken. I wear a lot of hats, but tonight I am here as a citizen and I happen to be disabled, even though I look fine. And have been for over 20 years, and that has given me a lot of time to volunteer when I am able to. And part of that time I volunteered with CAPS and still volunteer with CAPS. But tonight I'm here as a citizen and I volunteered in the neighborhood. And things are getting worse as far as crime goes. I can tell you in the last year, and I've lived in the city my entire life, and we've been in this neighborhood for 30 years. I've almost been the victim of a carjacking. I was awakened by people breaking in to the business across the street from us and destroying their property because they couldn't get the vehicles out. And when you call 911 now, the first thing the operator tells you is get away from your windows. This isn't okay. We had librarians going to work several weeks ago by us, and 2 of them were mugged at 9 a.m. in the morning. We talk about the police and working with the disabled and being able to work with us and how you're going to deal with us. I want you to know how this crime is affecting the disabled and the senior citizens. We're afraid to leave our houses. We have to live here because I need medical care. And now we're looking at a future where are we going to go? Because someday I'm going to need to take public transportation because I won't be able to drive. And I need the top end medical facilities that are here in this city, but we live in fear. My husband worries every day when he leaves for work at 7:30 in the morning that he's going to be attacked leaving our house. This isn't okay. And I feel for people that have lived this way in other neighborhoods for years, but something has to change. That's all I have to say. And I didn't have a question. Thank you.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Frank Chapman, Lisa Stringer. I'm sorry, Steve Neidenbach. Wait, all of those folks on Zoom? Is there a Steve Neidenbach in person? Steve left, okay, yeah, Nikki Pine. Let me know who. Have a way for him to make his comment virtually where we can hear it? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Frank.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just want to raise the question again. I know that with the last speaker died, that there was kind of a diversion from the question, and the question is why the recommendation of COPA could not be instituted. Why couldn't these police officers involved in shooting 96 times over a traffic violation, why couldn't they be suspended from the force, doing the course of this investigation. There's nothing typical about this situation. You know, there was a traffic stop based on a so-called seatbelt violation. I watched all of the videos that was released to the public. And it's not even clear that well, in fact, it is clear that he had tinted windows. So there's doubt as to whether or not they could even see whether or not he had a seatbelt on, you know. So much shooting took place until it's not clear from the video who shot who, you know. When Dexter exited the car, when he opened up the door and exited the car, he had no gun. Yet bullets were still being fired. And when he was on the ground, helpless and defenseless, three shots was fired into his body. So now that would seem to me to be sufficient grounds to suspend these police officers, take their policing powers away from them during the course of this investigation, which is what COPA recommended. I don't see why that can't be implemented.
Officers cannot be suspended until COPA is done with their investigations. There is no suspension until that happens. That has to be a recommendation by COPA that then goes to me. The investigation has to unfold. These officers are not on the street right now, and those officers can be shelved as long as I say they can be shelved. They're not in the field. They're not working in the field and stopping anyone. So right now they're on administrative duties, the same duties they would be on no matter what. So those officers will be in those positions while this investigation is going on. So until COPA's investigation is complete, nobody can be suspended.
Did you call on me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey Anthony, hey Terry, hey Superintendent Snelling. So
How are
and
you?
hey all my comrades that's in the audience, and I want to say my apologies that I can be in person, but I just left Springfield. But Superintendent Snelling, I am really just in disbelief that you got in this position. You've been in this position for almost 7 months, like you say, and you are truly disappointing the Black community with the decisions that you are making, and you following the same blue code that the other superintendents previously before you has done. Now, the facts are the facts. Those officers committed murder. It was an unjustifiable traffic stop. That's murder. So no matter if an officer of yours got shot or not, and truth be told, it could have been one of your officers that shot that officer that got shot. I'm not understanding why we got to go around this ring around the rosy with this injustice system, and then we put people in place like you and trusting that you stand by the Black community that's been harmed by officers. Not all officers are bad, but the officers that use brutality against the Black community on a constant basis. This isn't no just happening. This been happening. The community don't trust the police because the police started it for us not to trust the police. We didn't ask us down, pull us over, racially profile us. We didn't ask for none of that. They raised this war against us not being able to trust them and believe that y'all want to keep us safe because they never had. Thank you. So
I didn't hear a question.
Scott, do you want to ask her if she has a question? Are you typing it? Just take it off mute so we can ask her.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Anthony?
Yeah, do you have a question?
No, no, I thought y'all heard me when I said I really didn't have a question because everybody raised those questions. I'm just telling Superintendent Snelling to please the stand on the right side of this whole situation and previous situations and give the Black people the justice that we deserve, because it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse if they don't do right by us. A murder is a murderer,
Thank you,
and they
Driver.
need to be held accountable. Thank you.
So we've exhausted all of the public comments that have been sent up to us. Right now, we're gonna get ready to conclude the meeting. Superintendent, I don't know if you have closing remarks, or Vice President Terry, if there's something you would like to close with.
Just, I want everybody to understand this, right? Everybody has the right to speak up. And I can appreciate all of the comments made here today. I think the most important thing, though, is when we have this type of discourse, that we respect each other, regardless of what we think. I think that's the most important part. For those who are in fear in your communities, you fear this crime, we are working toward a better way of approaching these situations. For those who are concerned about police reform, it doesn't happen overnight, but I can guarantee you that we are working toward police reform. Lastly, when investigations are done, we have to allow those investigations to be done properly and without interference. And when we do that, then we can come to better conclusions on things. But just know and understand this. Chicago Police Department is going to be out there to protect you. We're going to work as hard as we can. It doesn't matter that we're short. We're training our officers. We're developing. We're working with technology, and we're going to do the best that we can to keep this city safe. So we're dedicated to doing that. I'm dedicated to doing that. So everything right now, I hold that water. I carry that water. So if there's anything that has to be done in this department to make it better and to make this city safer, I'm going to do my best to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you to our staff and the superintendent for helping us put this on. This meeting's adjourned.